Hi writers, it is so good to see you again. If you're watching this video, that means you have an idea for your writing and you're ready to get started, but you want to do some planning before you start drafting. That is a super duper good idea, and I suggest that everyone does that. And today I'm going to share with you a way that you can plan out your story so that you have the general idea of what's going to happen, so you don't get off track in your drafting. Okay, and that's really important because sometimes when we start drafting, we can forget, we can forget the main point of our story. We can spend so much time on the beginning that we really forget to develop that climax, or by the time we get to the middle, we're just like, I'm exhausted. I'm just going to write 3 sentences for the middle and 2 for the end, right? We really want to know our plan, know our story, and know where to spend the most of our time. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this with our story, Tomas and the Library Lady. This was our mentor text. If you haven't watched me read this video, if you haven't watched the video of me reading this story yet, I would suggest you do that so you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, you might get really confused. Okay? Stories generally follow a pattern, narrative stories. And that is, there are, in the beginning, you meet characters. You kind of understand the setting. Then the character faces a problem or two. Then the character faces kind of a big problem. That's what we call the climax. And then they find a solution for the problem, and then the book ends. So I call this the story mountain. And let me show you what this looks like for this book, Tomas and the Library Lady. So here I have my whiteboard. And just to remind you, we call this the story mountain. So it kind of looks like this. Okay? And when we're thinking about our story, we can kind of chunk it into a few different parts, right? So here's the beginning. And this is where we usually meet the characters. Okay? Then in the middle, there's kind of this part where the character might face. Then this ending part is where there's like this big, huge problem. We call this the climax. And then there's the big story problem and then the solution. Okay, wow, that looks super messy. I'm sorry. But just to show you, this is kind of the track that the character goes, right? Beginning, you just kind of learn some stuff about them. Then there's maybe a little problem or two, but they solve those. And then at the end, it's like, wow, here's a big problem. How are we going to solve it? And then they figure out the solution. So when we think about Tomas and the Library Lady, okay, we'll draw this again. In the beginning of the story, we meet Tomas, and we learn, I'll just flip through the pages. We learn about his family, that they are migrant workers, right? So they moved from Texas to Iowa and spend half the summer. So it's really hot. He just sleeps on a cot. So we're getting lots of information about his life. Okay? So there's the beginning of the story. We meet him and his family, and we learn his little bits about his story. Then in the middle is when we kind of start to learn about his love of hearing stories, right? And he wants to hear stories all the time, but his grandpa just kind of runs out of stories, right? So then he goes to the library. So the little problem was he wants more stories. And then the way that gets solved is he goes to the library. And this isn't a huge problem, right? But it is something that, a struggle he faces in the story. So then he has this experience, he reads the book, everything's wonderful. Wow, he's really living his best life. He goes to find more books. He's telling stories to his family. And he's teaching the library lady words in Spanish, and he's, everything's wonderful. And then, oh no, he has to leave. He has to go back to Texas. So that's kind of the big problem here. Go back to Texas. Right? How is he going to continue his love of books? And then the library lady gives him his own special book that he can take with him. And so at the end of the story, you see him traveling in the car with his special book from his library lady, and he still gets to experience this love of books, right? So the solution here is library lady gives him a book. Okay, so this is kind of what the story mountain looks like in this book, Tomas and the Library Lady. Okay, here you can see my story mountain. So here in this beginning, I want to talk about how, kind of set the scene, tell about the characters, Archer, Atlas, and me, and where we are, the setting at the beach. And I'll put lots of details in that part. Then in the middle, there's this little problem where we couldn't find any crabs, but then we figured out if we turned over really big rocks, we could find more crabs. And then at the end, Atlas was so excited that he started picking up the crabs and his finger got pinched. This was a big problem, and it was like he was screaming. So this has a lot of emotion in it. And then the solution here is that I pinched the pinchers and kind of dug my fingernail under him so that they finally released his finger. Okay? Okay, this lesson is getting really long, I know. And that's because we did two really big things here. The first is teach you about the story mountain and model how it looks like with Tomas and the library lady. Then I also showed you how I'm going to use it with my own story. Okay, so I know it's long and I apologize. But I want to show you again, now I have it's like a map of how my story is going to go. I know what I'm going to write in the beginning, I know what I'm going to write in the middle, and I know what I'm going to write in the end. And that's really going to help me to stay on track and keep organized. So now that I have my plan, I can grab my loose paper and start drafting. If you try this strategy today and you feel really good about your plan, then you can also start drafting, which might just be the most fun part of the writing process. Okay. Have fun writing, everyone. I'll see you soon.